Good evening and welcome to episode 267 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. It's a Wednesday edition of the Private Property Podcast, and this evening we're doing things slightly differently. As you can see, I'm in a different location. We've got lights even in front of me, and we're going to be changing things a little bit, and we're going to share with you why we've done things slightly differently on our social media pages. So do watch out for that great announcement that we're quite excited to share with you in due course. Well, talking about social media and what you can find, of course, on our social media platforms, you know that you can find other great shows that we have besides this one. As it is a Wednesday this evening, you can catch the First Time Home Buyers Show with Esther Classen later on at 8 p.m. I was actually with Esther just a moment ago, so you can already see that the team is gathered, the troops are gathering, and we're certainly planning some great things to bring to your screens here at home. And of course, on Thursdays as well as on Tuesdays, you can catch award-winning farmer Umbali Noko with the Farming Podcast. So if you've got green fingers or want to explore all things agriculture, that is a show that you want to make sure you are tuned into. And every Friday, as well as on Monday, you can catch Chad. And of course, he brings you the Home Shoppers Show. And that's a show that you want to make sure that you tune into, and you want to get a sense of some of the great properties that we have on the Private Property website. And that is, of course, www.privateproperty.co.za. So do make sure that you tune in, you follow us across our social media pages so that you're always in touch with all our offering and, of course, helping you on your property journey. Now, talking about our social media, you can follow myself at Zamantungwa_K on Twitter as well as on Instagram. Now, one of the things I'm excited about this evening's conversation is we've brought somebody back that we're always going to welcome back to the show, and that is Candice van Dijk, who's a co-founder at Property Fix. She's a property investor herself. And this evening we're going to be exploring what it takes to make a career out of property investment in 2021. I know that in as much as a lot of property investors don't full on make this a career, it's kind of a side thing that we've been doing. There are many of you at home who want to explore going full time and really want to get a good sense of what you would need to do in order to be able to transition, how you need to be tackling property investment as a business, whether you're looking at buy to let, whether you're looking at flipping, or any kind of other property investment strategy that you will be using for your portfolio. And I want to welcome Candice. Candice, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us yet again on the show.
Good evening, Zama. Thank you once again for having me. Always awesome being with you on the show.
It's always such a pleasure to have you, Candice. I mean, and I think if anything, your property journey is one of those journeys that should be, I don't even want to say a template. I think a good example of how there is no one way to property investment, but there are certain fundamentals and principles that if you get those things right, you're certainly going to be positioning yourself for success. And before we get to some of those, because I know that you've got a really great set of, I'll say, principles that you want us to go through, let's perhaps look at property investment as a career in 2021. I want to get a sense on, whether if somebody was like, should I go into property? I get asked this question quite a lot. Should I be getting into property? I want to transition into it full time. What is your sense certainly for people who are asking that question, who want to make that transition, looking at, your years of experience within the industry, but also where we currently are right now? What would you say to people who are looking at making that leap?
Awesome. Yes, so I think first it's important to understand that one can have multiple careers in place. So it's important to know that wherever you find yourself today, whether you are in a full-time job or maybe you are self-employed or, maybe you've got a business venture that you've just started up. Wherever you find yourself today, I think it's important to know that you can have multiple careers in place. Now, as part of my talk for today, one of the things that I just want to unpack a little bit more, because we are talking about how to make property investment a career in 2021, I think it's important to understand firstly what a career is. So what do we mean when we say making property investment a career in 2021? Now, I just took the liberty of just going, online as I was preparing for this today, and I just want to share it with you. So let's just look at the definition of a career. So this is taken from an online dictionary. I mean, anyone will be able to access this. It says that a career is an occupation undertaken for a significant period of a person's life with opportunities for progress. Now, that's important to note. I'm going somewhere with this. And then if you unpack occupation a little bit more, it says that it is a job or a profession which is a paid occupation, especially one that involves training. Now, I love the idea that it says that it is a paid occupation. Now, I want you to have that mindset as well, that when you start property investing as a career, you want to get paid through property, isn't it? You don't want it to take money out of your pocket. You want to ensure that, you get to a stage where you're exchanging your time for money, and ultimately you start building this portfolio that will then start generating income for you. So putting money into your pocket. And that is why I say that one can have multiple professions. So you can have multiple careers over a significant period of your life that is able to put money into your pockets.
I actually love that, Candice, because I think it's one of those things, certainly for my generation, as millennials, we're living the reality of having multiple careers, sometimes even at the same time. Often you're going to be maybe changing or transitioning into different careers over a period of time. And it probably brings us to a question that I want to ask viewers at home around how they've transitioned to different careers or how they've got to property. Because I think with so many people, some are doing property on the side. It's just your side business, you're growing it or you're running it. With others, they are looking at property as a long-term investment that they want to be able to pass down to their children once they're retiring. So I want to hear from you at home what your multiple careers are and also how you got to property. Because, I mean, we spend a lot of time every single weekday, you and I have a chat about property as an asset class and the different ways that we view property. And also, of course, property as homes that we live in. But with many people, some were accidental investors and some were very deliberate in wanting to choose this particular asset class as one that they invest in. So, Candice, I know that for this evening, you've used Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, as a nice breakdown. So you want us to go through these habits and how they effectively apply to property, particularly because you essentially want to shed light on how they can apply to somebody who's looking at making property a career this year. So let's get to that first one. And I love this first habit around being proactive. So how can we make sure that we tie this into property? How is this relevant within the property space when you want to venture into property investment as a career?
Yes, so thanks, Zama. So it's so important, to be proactive in any career, in fact, that you're going to be pursuing, because if you think about it, being proactive means that we take action. So it means that you're actually doing something. And if you're not doing something, then there's no opportunity to generate the income or generate the money that you need. So in property, the same principle applies, is that if you want to be in a position where your property start bringing money into your pockets, you can't just sit where you are today and say to yourself, I want to make a success out of property this year, but then you're not doing anything or you're not doing anything differently. So that means that you are going to have to do something that is going to help you move yourself forward in terms of growing your portfolio, whatever it may be. But I think just to backtrack, just one thing I want to share, Zama, as we lead into this, is that I just want to say that as part of making property investing a career, you need to really be relentless in pursuing your dreams and your goals. It doesn't matter where you are today. You have to ensure that you are relentless, and being relentless means that you are persistent. So even if you've tried before, it didn't work out, don't give up. This time, just prepare better for success. And part of what I'm going to be sharing with you as part of these 7 habits and how we can related to property investing will help you to set yourself up for success as you move forward. So just remember, be proactive, no action, no money. So if we want the money, we have to be proactive and take action. We have to develop ourselves.
You know, Candice, when you talk about being proactive, it actually reminds me, I think there was something or another, either I was reading something or I was watching something, because I obviously also consume property content from different parts of the world, because I like to get a sense of what's happening in other markets outside of our own. And there was a property investor who's in the US who was talking about just how many properties that they sometimes view, right? That they sometimes would probably view 30, 40, even up to 50 properties before they buy a particular property. Their strategy is buy to let. And so they're in the habit of constantly viewing different properties, understanding what's happening in different neighborhoods, and even those that they are still invested in. And sometimes they're not necessarily viewing to acquire a property, but to get a sense of the various complexes that are in that particular area, or get a sense of the complex that's next door where you are investing. So it gives you a really good sense of what is out there in the market, and at every single point. And I think when I heard that, I actually realized how I tend to not go to view a place when the numbers don't stack up from the get-go. And I think from just watching that, a part of me thought, you know what, sometimes it actually is valuable to still have the viewing, because you might be interested in another property within that space. And so there was even a goal that I set for myself, that I want to be able to view, you know, X number of properties in a month, and make it a habit to view different properties, and not just, run the numbers and say, these numbers don't make sense, next property. Because usually I work the other way around. If the numbers don't stack up from when I'm still in conversation with the estate agent, I simply just do not watch. I don't go and view that property. So I think being proactive, as you're saying, is so important. And it's one of those things that proactivity looks different for different people, but knowing that you're not just sitting back and waiting for some of these great properties to, land on your lap is certainly important. Now, the second habit then, Candice, is beginning with the end in mind. And I know this one can sometimes be such a difficult one for people at home. How do we look at it when it comes to our property investment, and really using this principle in that regard?
Yes. So what I also want to say is, property is a numbers game. So you need to know that you are going to have to work through multiple deals before you really tap into that one great deal. And I'm sure some of you have heard it before, that property is a numbers game. So if you set a goal for yourself to view 20 properties a week or 20 properties a month, whatever your goal is, it's important to know that, it is a numbers game. And I remember this, one trainer said to me some years back, he said that one deal can change your life. So tapping into that one deal can change your life as far as generating healthy income is concerned. Now, when you begin with the end in mind, that's really where it starts. You have to see what your future life looks like. So you have to know what that future looks like. If you can't see the end, if you can't see what your end portfolio looks like, if you can't see what your future life looks like, it's going to be very difficult for you to become successful through property. Because you must remember that property is just a vehicle, if you think about it, for us to use that will help us to generate the income that we need so that we can ultimately achieve that end desire or that end goal. So always keep that at the top of your mind. So however you are managing it today, I still work on my dream wall. It is something that I see all the time, every day, every time I walk past it. And I tell you, I'm so motivated every time I see it. It's a way of motivating myself and helping myself to see that end picture all the time. So even though I may not be where I want to be today, that keeps me motivated. So you also need to look at what will your end portfolio look like, and then work yourself backwards from that point, if that makes sense.
It definitely does make sense, Candice. And I think one of the tricky things with property, especially for those who are looking to go into it, is that sometimes you don't quite have a sense of what you want the end portfolio to look like. Perhaps with some people who might say, I just want to have 30 properties, for argument's sake, right? And these 30 properties must generate X amount. And once you really do get started within the property space, you realize that you previously wanted 30 single units. Perhaps now you may want only 10 single units and actually 30 buildings for instance. So I think even understanding that end in mind may slightly shift in as far as how the portfolio itself will look like. But the bottom line still remains, as you pointed out earlier, Candice, that you want to be making an income. And so sometimes perhaps for you, the end in mind might be when you retire, this is the kind of money you want to be making. And this is where you want your net worth to be at the end, and then working your way backwards into that. So there are different ways to even look at or even understanding having the end in mind where property is concerned. Because I know, Candice, one of the things, I mean, I think when I started, I had a number of how many properties I wanted to have by a certain age. And the more I've been into it, I've shifted the number, and the number shift is actually now bigger. But also the types of properties that I'm looking at has fundamentally changed. So I think having that and being able to be agile in how you look at things does become such a crucial one. And Candice, the next habit is such an important one. But I want us, when we tackle this, because the third habit is putting first things first. I want to get a sense from you, what are the first things? Because I think that's where some people perhaps may not have the greatest sense of what the first things are when it comes to property investment as a career. And perhaps you can take us through what those things are, because you don't know what you don't know before going into something. And I'm sure many viewers at home probably want to recognize the blind spots that they have, and some that they potentially didn't even know they had.
For sure. So, putting first things first actually relates directly to your goals. And, as you said earlier on, you said, as one progresses in life, your goals sometimes change. And I think it's okay that your goals change, because as you go through different stages, or as your preferences change, or your desires or your goals, whatever it may be, with time, some of those things will change. And it's okay for those things to change, but it's important for you to adapt your new situation now to how you are changing. What you may have wanted 5 years ago is no longer important to you today, and maybe it will not be important to you even in the next 5 years. So I think it's important to look at it from that perspective. But when we talk about, putting first things first, it's about what is that next thing that you need to do that is going to move you one step closer to your property investment goal. Now, one of the things that I can just share with you, and this is something that I still do today, is that I ensure that I spend a lot of time reading on what is happening in the property market. From a rental perspective, from a capital flip perspective, it's so important to educate yourself, empower yourself. So that's one of the things that I do. Why? Because I need that information as I am moving my property goals forward. So you need to understand, where are you today? Where do you want to be? And what is just that one thing that you need to do that's going to move you one step closer, to your goal? Another thing that you could maybe think about doing is, and this is so important in property, is that you have to always be working on building your network. So that's important. So in property is not a one-man show, journey or career. You have to ensure that you are continuously building your network, looking for the right people that you can associate yourself with, surrounding yourself with the right people, because, iron sharpens iron, and it's important that you're always surrounded with people, in some cases, who are even more successful than what you are, who are doing bigger deals. Because as you're spending more time with them, that rubs off on you. And then it starts, empowering you from that point onward. So sometimes it's just taking those little steps that can move you forward towards your next property investment goal.
We are taking your questions and comments at home this evening as we explore what it takes to make a career out of property investment this year. I'm in conversation with Candice van Wyk, who's a co-founder and a property investor herself, a co-founder, of course, of Property Tech. We've got a comment coming through on Facebook from Erasmus who says, I've also learned that property investment is a long-term relationship. Erasmus, I always joke that when you buy a property, and even if you're not investing, particularly when you sign up for a bond, 20-year bond, it's probably very easily going to be the longest relationship that you're going to be in. And my joke is always that I know I don't have commitment issues because I've got quite a number of those 20-year long relationships that I have signed up for. So it really is understanding that it's long term, especially if that's part of your strategy. I know with some people you're buying to flip and to sell, and so that with the period that you would have that particular property is slightly shorter. But of course, the act of being in business and flipping those properties, that's still fairly long term. When you're flipping that property, you need to make sure that you're still ensuring that the quality is good, so that whoever buys the property, lives there, or invests with that particular property has bought a good property. And I think that's something that we sometimes take for granted, Candice, especially in this day and age where we really do want quick returns. And there are various people, and I'll say even especially during this COVID pandemic, who say they can give you X returns per year. Some are saying over 20% returns per year. Understanding that it's a long-term game, understanding that you're not going to make all of your money in 1 year, understanding that you're not going to, have 40% yield, for example, is a difficult one. And I've seen a lot of people sometimes thinking that property is the silver bullet to to their financial issues, or that it's going to make them rich overnight. Perhaps, I'm keen to hear from you, Candice, around how we can almost better cement the long-termness of property, because I am getting a lot of that sentiment right now about it's low interest rates, by now you're going to make a lot of money, and really that isn't how your property investment works, even when you're not looking at it as a career and just looking at having maybe 1 or 2 investment properties in your portfolio.
And you're so right, Zama. Property is really a long-term relationship that one needs to, prepare yourself for. It's definitely not an overnight get-rich type of strategy. You are going to have to work the strategy over the short term, over the medium term, and of course, over the long term. And that will relate directly to what your goals are. What is it that you want to achieve in the short term? What strategy in property can help you achieve that financial goal in the short term? What strategy can help you achieve it in the medium term, in the long term? Let's say, for example, you want to leave a legacy for your future generations. That also becomes a long-term strategy. So what do you have to do today in order to build that cash flow pot so that, one day when you're not here, that your property investing will be able to take care of the future generations that are maybe part of your family today. So I think it's definitely important to have that understanding, know the strategies that will be able to help you achieve your goals, your financial goals over the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And of course, that goes back to then empowering yourself with the right knowledge, get the right knowledge and the right strategies, because there's so many different things that you can do in property. And when you start also associating yourself and expanding yourself with people who are successful in property, you start learning about more creative strategies, about more creative ways to actually finance your deals. So there's so many different things that you can do in property, but you must also, as part of having this long-term relationship, no one wants to be in a relationship where there's no love, where there's no commitment.
I love it. I love that. I think, and the love goes both ways, right, Candice? Because I think and what I mean by the love goes both ways is you buy a property and you get a great tenant who, stays there and they pay on time every time, but then you don't maintain your property. So in as much as you want to buy a property that's going to be great income generating, where you'll also be able to have a surplus, you also need to equally show that property some love by taking care of it and making sure that everything is up to date, pay your rates and taxes, pay your levies or whatever other costs that are associated with it. Now, the next habit, Candice, is seeking to understand. And before we even unpack how that relates to property, I think I want to get a sense from you. What were some of the things when you look back now that you didn't understand when you started, and you're only or over the years have gotten to have a better understanding of them? Because I think this will help viewers at home also just identify things they don't know. Because I think people who've now been in the space, certainly a lot of things that when you were looking from the outside, you didn't really understand. And now you have a better understanding of those particular things.
Yeah, so the first thing definitely is cash flow. So I didn't really understand the power of cash flow early in my journey. And that is when you buy property and you investment property that you rent out, but you want to generate positive income from it. So you want to make profit income. So I never used to look at property, through those eyes. For me, it was just about acquiring a property. And this is what happened in the beginning, acquiring property and then also having to pay in that extra, 1,000, 2,000, 2,000 and a half, whatever it was at the time, in order to have a tenant staying in your property. But of course, when you go through that mindset shift and you now become a trained property investor, you understand the power of cash flow, because that's what you're looking for. Cash flow is going to bring you financial freedom. So you want to ensure that from the beginning, you invest in cash flowing properties that will be able to bring in positive income into your pockets, even if it's just a small amount. You don't have to go for the big, massive amounts from the beginning, but, start by doing the numbers and ensuring that if you're going to go into that deal, you have taken into account all of the costs, all of the expenses on that particular property. And you also know what the rental income is going to be. Do your homework. Don't just thumbsuck and think, this is the state of my property and I know I can get X amount. No, you need to understand what the market is able to offer you. And from that point onward. So I think that's definitely the power of cash flow. And the second thing, just quickly, Zama, is also structures. And I think I've mentioned this in previous talks before, that it's so important to buy property in the right structures. You don't necessarily have to buy it in your individual capacity. And once you understand the different structures that are out there, and I'm talking about like PTY structures, trust structures, once you understand the different structures and also the benefits of buying through the different structures, you will also look at your property investment through different eyes. So it's important to understand what the tax implications will be and then make the best decision from that place onwards as well.
And then, Candice, when we talk about thinking win-win where property investment as a career is concerned, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. And I think you've mentioned it, Zama. You said, when we're in this long-term love relationship, it's a two-way thing. So your tenant is putting money into your pocket, but you also need to ensure that you're looking after them. So your property needs to be well maintained and all of that. And your property wants you to look after it. Why? Because it wants to have a tenant staying in it. So I think it's just important to know that when you're investing in property, whether it's, working with your tenants, whether it's expanding your power team, because that's also important. You also need to look at expanding your power team, and you need to ensure that you're working on win-win relationships. No one is going to stay in a relationship if they're not benefiting from it. So both parties want to benefit. So just remember, as you start expanding your power team, and for those of you who don't know what a power team is, it's really just a professional team of property experts. So, and they could be attorneys, they could be accountants, tax specialists, whatever they may be, but you need to start building that power team. And just remember that it is a win-win. You need to look at it almost like a love relationship, that you're going into. So definitely, look at both parties' benefits there.
And I think that flows so greatly with the next point around synergizing. When we look at property investment, what are some of the ways that we need to be on top of when it comes to synergizing, whether it may be with the power team, whether it may even be with other property professionals that we work with?
Yes. So that synergize in this context really means about you need to become more creative in your deals. So you need to look at creative ways of growing your income. For example, when you look at a property, let's say a 3-bedroom house, look at that property and ask yourself, can I maybe subdivide that property and be able to generate 2 streams of income from that property? Or even, can I bring in another property on the same premises? So we need to become creative in terms of how we pursue our deals. We also need to look at creative ways of getting into a deal. Most of you are just familiar with applying for a home loan, but there are other creative strategies that you also need to consider. So it's about becoming creative as we move our property goals forward. And I think that's really the main point on Synergize, is the creativity.
And when we look at creativity, Candice, actually even think about how we've covered different topics that have given viewers a sense of how they can potentially be creative in getting into deals or into acquiring a property. Because as you rightfully point out, a lot of people are familiar with only going to a bank to get a home loan. And there really are various different ways that you can acquire a property, whether it's alone or, of course, working with other people, and making sure that the deal still makes sense for everybody, and that the profit course, is able to be shared accordingly. And I guess, Candice, the last point, and you already started alluding to it earlier on in the conversation. The last habit, of course, is around sharpening the saw. I think, what are some of the ways that we can consistently make sure that we do that? I know viewers at home already know this, because it's one of those things that we always emphasize quite a lot when it comes to being on top of your knowledge, being on top of what you consume. But certainly from your end, Candice, what have been some really great resources that you have used in order to make sure that you're on top of your property game?
Yeah, so and this really talks to the individual, so it's so important to look after yourself. So sharpen the saw. Yes, you need to expand your knowledge base, but it's also looking after you, the individual, ensuring that you are physically healthy, getting the right level of mental stimulation, social well-being, spiritual well-being. All of these things contribute to, being a successful property investor. In one of the property coaching programs that I do, we've got a tool that we call the Wheel of Life. And basically, it contains various pillars that are part of your life, and we've got different things. We've got careers, we've got health, we've got relationships, finances, and so it continues. But it's so important to try and have a balance, as far as that Wheel of Life is concerned, because if any area is out of balance, it's going to affect your property investing. So that is why you need to understand where you are in terms of that balance today. Maybe it could be your career is getting so much time that you're neglecting social time, or you're neglecting, physical time, in terms of maybe exercising or whatever the case may be. So you need to understand where you are today, and you need to ensure that you're always pursuing that holistic, approach in terms of your well-being, because if one area is out, it's definitely going to affect your property investing journey. So also remember to look after you, the individual, as part of this journey.
I love that, because, and the reason why I love that so much, Candice, is we tend to not focus on the individual. And this isn't just in property, but I think generally, we're so busy with chasing deadlines, climbing up the corporate ladder, attending to our side hustles with the main business, that we forget to just check in with ourselves to make sure that the center holds and that the center is nourished. Whether it is, I typically go on hikes on Sundays to just make sure that I'm centered. I haven't gone on a hike in a few weeks. So that gives you a sense of how I've also been neglecting myself a little bit. And as you so rightfully point out, more often than not, when we neglect ourselves, it has a ripple effect on other areas of our lives, whether it's career, sometimes even family. So it is so important to make sure that the center is taken care of, because that gives us all the tools that we need, or certainly the foundational tools that we're going to need in order to take care of the other areas of our lives. Candice, before I let you go, any final tip for people who are still slightly on the fence around taking a property investment as a career option for certainly this year and going forward?
First thing that I want to say to them is that the time is now. Don't put it off any longer. The time is now. The opportunities are out there. So you need to get yourself ready. If you really want to start generating additional income and really start building your property portfolio, and not just for today, but for lasting reasons, financial reasons, to really build your wealth, it's important to take advantage of the opportunities today. And then I just want to say to you is that, as property investors, it doesn't matter where you are on your journey. We don't quit, we keep going, and we never give up. So just continue sharpening that saw, continue growing your knowledge base, expanding your network, building your skills in the area of property investing, and ensuring that you get the right level of knowledge, and you will be able to achieve your goals. Don't give up. Your goals are just around the corner to be achieved. So that's last words from me, Zama.
And that's a great place to leave it at, Candice. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Zama. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure being on the show. Thank you.
And that is Candice van Wyk, who's a co-founder at Property Tech. And that brings us to the end of this evening's edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. Has been great to be with you this evening. It is a Wednesday, so you can look forward to the First Time Home Bar Show with Essie Clarkson at 8 p.m. I'll be back on the screens tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Until then, hoping you stay home and stay safe.